I found this really great decorative piece, and anytime there's anything like this with some raised detailing on it, I love to highlight it. I'm a big fan of painting anything that's a dark wood to a lighter color and distressing through to see this darker color. Now, I really like the color that this wood is now, so I don't really need to do anything to it other than give it a really light scuff sand. However, for example, if it was a totally different color, say it was orange or pink or red, and I wanted to distress through to a brown, I would apply a coat of chocolate paint on first. It's a little tip that you can use to kind of get that real wood color coming through as you distress. So I want to show you how easy it is to scuff sand and what a scuff sand means. This is a really super shiny, high gloss piece. I'm going to take my sanding pad, it's about a 500 grit, and I'm simply going to pass it across a few times. And you're kind of almost, think of it as cleaning down your piece. You want to take a rag and just remove that excess dust that's there. And you can see within just a few seconds, a couple of passes back and forth, we have taken away the high gloss sheen that's there. When you take that sheen away, it gives the paint something really to grip onto, and you get less brush strokes and a much nicer application. Whereas when you're trying to paint on something that's super glossy, it's a much more slick surface. The paint sort of slides around a little bit more. Sometimes you can get more brush strokes from that as well. So that's how simple and quick and easy it is to do a scuff sand. Now, on my raised areas, that's it. Very simple, very quick. Again, you want to wipe down that dust. And we are going to use the beeswax distressing block. And I'm going to just simply rub that on all of the raised areas, get into those grooves. This is a resist technique. So anywhere that I apply this wax, the paint will come off when you are going to distress it with a little bit of sandpaper after. So the more wax that you use, the less the paint will adhere. Let the wax do the job for you. It makes your distressing so much easier. What I like about this particular product is its exact placement of where you want the distressing to occur. See all these nice little fine lines in here? I'm actually just gonna run the block alongside, just as if you were sort of coloring in the lines, because I really want to highlight this afterwards when I am distressing. I really want to see this detailing come through. Now our next step is going to be applying the paint. So I've just finished applying the beeswax block to all of the edges and all along the top here, so that when I put my paint onto it, it's going to act as a resist, and it's going to make it really, really easy to remove. I'm just using a really inexpensive synthetic brush, and I'm going to apply one coat. This is Champlain. The lighter colors usually require 2, sometimes potentially 3 coats, depending on how much paint you have on your brush. And I would rather do 2, maybe 3 thinner coats of paint, because you can control brush strokes really nicely when you don't have too much paint on your brush. And when you're in these areas, I just kind of really put a ton of paint in there, and then I remove the excess about a minute or so afterwards with my brush. So I'm just gonna finish painting this up, let it dry, and then we get to see the magic of the distressing with the beeswax block. Wet distressing is a really great technique to get a very natural looking distress. When you are working on a surface that was previously painted, it was pretty high gloss, it's always nice to do a little bit of wet distressing. It just gives you a really nice natural look and finish. So I've got a little bit of water and my sanding sponge. This is a reusable one. So wet distressing really is distressing with a wet tool. So for instance, this sponge here, I'm just gonna damp it. You don't want it to be too wet, so you can dry it off a little. You don't want to have too much excess water around. And I had applied the beeswax distressing block, so in those areas, it's going to come off very, very easily. There we go. Now when you're wet distressing and you want to distress a flat area, make sure your sandpaper is nice and wet, and you're just going to use a little bit more, not too much pressure. If you apply too much pressure, what happens is you remove a lot of paint all at once. You want to wet distress within about half an hour to an hour after painting, when the paint is still pretty fragile to water. And when you add water, it sort of breaks apart the paint. So it's fragile. There we go, we've got a nice edge there that we've distressed, and we take our cloth and just kind of wipe back so you can see all of that nice crisp edge there. I'll just continue on, applying pressure to some of the detailed areas there, all along the top where you have a lot of wear and tear. And the key is you don't want to have too much water on there, and you don't want to apply too much pressure while you're wet distressing a piece that had a fairly shiny finish. If you were wet distressing a piece that was raw wood, you can go ahead and apply pretty much as much pressure as you want on there, because the raw wood's really going to absorb the paint quite nicely. There we go. And just wipe away the excess so you can really see that distressing come through. This type of detailing here is really beautiful to highlight and accent. Just going to dampen it a little bit with some water. Then I've got my sanding sponge. You don't need to apply too much pressure. So you see there where the color is pretty muddied, you want to wipe back. And as soon as I wipe this back, you're going to see the color really come through. So it's important to keep a damp rag nice nearby and close, because you may be surprised at how quick the distressing can be. And before you know it, sometimes you've removed a little bit too much of the paint. So just a nice fine touch. Practice makes perfect. And the good thing is it's just paint. So if you distressed too much, you can paint over it again, wait for it to dry for another half an hour to an hour, and try it again. Again, practice makes perfect. But look at how beautiful that is. It's just grabbed all of the edges just to highlight. That's it. Wet distressing, super easy. We finished our distressing, and I want to continue to age it up to make it look even more of an older piece. But you can see here the original dark wood that's showing through with a little bit of sanding after using my distressing block there. It's really revealed it quite nicely. Didn't take much effort at all. And now off to add a little bit of espresso wax. Espresso is that sort of warm brown color. And I'm just going to buff it into the areas here. Give it an overall aged look. And the espresso wax, your darker waxes, can significantly darken a lighter color. So to keep that in mind, always a good idea. And if you ever want to remove any, you can actually use the clear wax as a bit of a magic eraser. But for now, we've got the espresso on there, and I'm going to just take a cloth and sort of buff away the excess so that the darkness stays in some of the deeper, more recessed areas. Just a little bit of buffing is all you need. You just don't want to have a ton of wax sitting there left over. And I didn't put much on my brush, just barely enough to see it. And that's the wax that's coming off on the rag. There we go. It's a bit of an artistic flair here as to how much you want to apply. Okay, there we go. And there you have it, our beautiful aged and distressed piece.